Welcome, bienvenue. Welcome once again to Property Quorum. Property Quorum is a place where we throw around ideas that are currently in the property sphere, and the things that can affect people who are involved in property, buying property, or involved in supporting those kind of purchases. Today's topic, a little bit scary. Hold on to your hats. It's all about MTD, making tax digital, or is it MLH, making life harder? Well, we'll have to find out. But to start us off, as ever, Hamish McClay.
Well, I must admit, over the last sort of few years, probably about sort of 10 or 12 actually, there's been a lot of people, well, I say a lot of people, certain groups of people who are making large sums of money as a consequence of the government's ever increasing steps into sort of various aspects of business, and particularly to do with property. One of them is accountants, and accountants must be making a wonder, because they just add, 20, 25 years ago, it was possible to do one's own accountancy work. It was straightforward. And now, of course, we get layers, and like we have in conveyancing, we have layers and layers and layers. And this new one would be absolutely fine if people were actually receiving a regular income. If that income could be guaranteed, it might be possible to be able to sort of work a system that demands payments on a slightly different basis to the way in which they have been. Of course, what we're going to have to do is to get involved with our accountants, see what our accountants think, work in conjunction with our accountants, and try and keep ahead and try and keep on top of what is going on. Unfortunately, as lay people, we don't have the courtesy of the MPs and the rest of them. Should we make a mistake, heavy sort of burdens are placed upon us with additional sort of expenditure because we haven't paid this or we haven't actually sort of paid that. The biggest challenge is many of our landlords are part-time landlords, to the extent that they have a smallish portfolio. They aren't working on their properties 24 hours a day or even 8 hours a day. It might be 8 hours a week, 8 hours a month. It's all right for the big corporates because they have vast people sort of wading about, sort of doing different things for them. But those who have that smaller portfolio, it's putting that additional pressure on them to actually sort of not only to keep on sort of top of things, but also just put that additional sort of burden on. So at this particular sort of moment in time, it might be of benefit to the government. It might be of benefit to accountants. And to a large extent, it might be, the other changes that I was meant to sort of speak about were, with all these changes sort of coming about, it was actually going to make a significant difference to basically the poor buyer and seller of properties, because all of these burdens increase the cost to them. It increased rent to them. So the burden is being put upon the person who wants to live in a safe home.
Well, thank you for starting us off, Hamish. Silas, I note that there are many landlords, I don't believe, that even realise that the rules have already started.
Well, this is a great question, Gareth, and I'd like to give perhaps a little bit of context that I found highly relevant this week, coming from a gentleman called Daniel Priestley. And he said that many years ago, before Oasis actually launched the song Wonderwall, a gentleman called Andy Burnham had got himself a job, I believe, as a reporter working for a small newspaper. And for context, that job is the only job that anybody of the current Labour front bench has ever had in the course of the last 30 years. Okay, now if we just pause and reflect on what that actually means, one person in the Labour front bench for the last 30 years has held a job. Everybody else hasn't. Everybody else hasn't run a business. Yet they're making decisions that impact the wider sphere of you and I in our day-to-day lives. And one of the themes that's coming through time and time again, and this is not just aimed at Labour, this is not a Labour or red versus blue argument. It's this utter contempt for tenants via utter contempt for the landlords. And what I'm seeing more and more is we have now a situation where landlords are being squeezed out of the market because they've just had enough of the rules keep changing, and it seems to be that they are the political football. And so as they leave, more tenants are without homes, which forces rents up, as we've seen time and time again with the cycle. And so if you were a straight thinking person, you would sit here and go, well, hang on a minute. If we're taxing more landlords are leaving, why don't we offer tax incentives to get more landlords in to solve the housing crisis that we've already got that's unfolding in front of us? More supply means lower rents. And they're not talking about that at all. They're talking about, well, shall we tax rental income on a monthly basis? And shall we also put rent controls in place? And none of this, to my mind, is conducive to a free-flowing property market. It's not conducive to a market that serves tenants in a way that they have more choice, more freedom of choice, and therefore lower rents. And it seems to be whatever the government is touching is going in the opposite direction of what they're saying at the ballot box, as it were. And the underlying issue seems to be, this is not a socialist thing, i.e. take money from everywhere and then give it all away to people that aren't working. But it's more of a technocratic kind of agenda, a corporate agenda. Put rules in place that serve the larger corporates that only employ a very small amount of people, and then affect the wider populace by actually instigating policies that just don't work in practice. And I think make it this sort of proposal that's in the works at the moment, as you quite rightly say, Gareth, is underway. It's being talked about. It's likely to be, implemented without any reference to you or I or any landlord in the country. And it's this absurd idea that, as Hamish has talked about, you just tax landlords a little bit more each month, and then we work it out at the end. And yet, you as a landlord, if you knew the job, you could have a tenant move into a property on the 1st of January and never pay any rent until you evict them a year or two later. And so we're supposed to believe that just because they made money on that property last year, that they then should be paying an extra £100 a month towards their tax bill. It's utter lunacy. But what do I know?
Well, I was going to say, are smaller landlords prepared for these thresholds to fall?
I'm not so sure that they are. I think, as we saw in that Property 118 survey a couple of months ago, the majority of landlords seem to be older in years, and I question their motivation to keep going in the face of constant changes, none of which are benefiting them, of course. They're making their lives harder. At what point do you go, I've had enough of this, I'm retiring, I'm hanging up my boots? Now, just on one particular road where I live and I travel into town, there must be now the best part of 20 properties that are ideal properties for first-time buyers, ideal for rentals, people starting out in life. They've all come up for sale. It's probably a stretch of a mile and a half, shall we say. There's about 20 properties on that road that have not been for sale for probably the best part of 10 or 15 years. And you would think that this is a good thing, that landlords are exiting, so they're putting these properties up for sale. They're not being tenanted, of course. So those 20 properties, those families have had to find somewhere else to live. But the important point is the first-time buyers are not buying those properties. Okay, whether it's affordability, whether it's they're scared, whether there's uncertainty in the economy, or whether or not the younger generation are looking at what's unfolding and they're wondering, is it all worth it? Is home ownership worth it? I'm having these conversations with younger people in their 20s now. Is it all worth it? Or shall I just sit back and rely on government handouts? Oh, I'll only work X number of hours per week.
Or the bank of mum and dad. Yeah.
And that's the sort of thinking that's going on, which to me is really worrying. Somebody who takes pride in a job well done wants to, I'd rather work for £5 an hour and work my ass off for £5 an hour, pardon my language, than I would accept £20 an hour from the government. And that thinking is just how I'm wired. But I don't understand the intent to put so much burden on small businesses that are struggling, that are taking risk. I mean, buying a property isn't just a cash purchase and we sit on it forever and just count our money as it comes in. It's risk. You've got to get a mortgage. It's illiquid. It takes a long time to sell a property in the UK right now. Even if you found a buyer tomorrow, you're probably not going to complete the sale by Christmas. Those are the sorts of things that nobody's factoring into this. And yet it's all about who can we take more from now, and that's what the state is doing. Who can we take more from, rather than saying how do we solve this problem in a way that benefits Joe Public?
I've got another angle for you.
Go on.
Well, first of all, can landlords continue what the vast majority of them are doing, which is using spreadsheets?
Oh, that's a great question.
Or do they have to go? Are they being forced behind the scenes into buying software?
I think habits are very difficult to change, and we could say that there's an effort to railroad people down a digital software route. You're quite right. Most of the accountants that I've spoken to, and I'll offer a different perspective on accountants and tax advisors in just a moment, but most of them tell me that landlords turn up with shoeboxes full of receipts about a week before the tax deadline and say, sort my taxes, or carrier bags full of receipts. It's just what they do. And I think that's an important point. One of the things I want to address, and I think this is really important for any landlord listening and any business owner listening, really, why would you go to an accountant for tax advice? Tax advice is a very specialist subject, okay? And I've heard instances where an accountant says you owe this much tax, and a tax advisor has looked at it through a different lens and says, no, you don't. And that substantial tax bill has been written off by the stroke of a pen. And this is an important point, is that you have a non-specialist dealing with a very specialist area of expertise. And one of the things that we were always taught as investors, as landlords, you go to a tax advisor for tax advice, not an accountant. And I think what I'm seeing more and more is that accountants are erring on the side of caution. They're just one level removed from a HMRC employee, if you ask me, that they're the ones that are gathering the revenue for HMRC, who, let's not forget, we're told that they've failed allegedly every audit for the last 30 years. But that aside, HMRC are there collecting money via the accountants, who will always err on the side of caution, because if they don't, what happens? HMRC's breathing down the neck of the accountant, creates a bit of friction with the client there, might lose the client. Better err on the side of caution. I'm not saying that's the case for all accountants, but it's certainly what I'm experiencing. And I think there's a day of reckoning for business owners where we start to push more towards specialist advice. And your digital tools, again, they're fine, but are they really improving efficiency? I'd rather go to somebody who knows what they're talking about.
I've got an extra level of irritation on top of that.
Please do.
If the accountant is managing a lot of that data, who owns it?
Great question. I mean, look at where we are in an age now today, Gareth, which our ancestors probably would have found absolutely ludicrous. But every single day, people are taking their phones and uploading personal details of their life to the internet.
Absolutely.
I'm on holiday this week. Look at where I am. Okay, well, now everybody who knows you knows that your house is empty for the next 2 weeks whilst you're in Costa del Sol or wherever, right? And this is the lunacy of the world that we're living in right now. I don't think people are pausing to reflect enough. And I'm a big fan of technology, but I'm an even bigger fan of people who actually know what they're talking about. And that's why I think we're very grateful that we surround ourselves with really good people. To answer that question about the data ownership, I would always point that the data should belong to us. But where in the terms and conditions does it say you've handed it over?
Well, once it's been worked on by the accountant, and if you've taken on that accountant and signed them onto effectively your payroll, as it were, theoretically the data belongs to them.
And if you want it back, it comes with a fee.
There we go.
Enhancing your points.
What happens when spouses who are trying to run their little property portfolio keep slightly different accounts?
Just to clarify this question, are we talking about people who might have separate jobs, separate job roles, or separate businesses, and then they're either jointly owning properties or they're
exactly that.
Exactly that. I mean, look, this is getting beyond the area of my expertise.
No, but it just seems to me that people aren't thinking this stuff through.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, that is, again, a highly specialist area. If you've got two people who own their own businesses and then they jointly decide to invest in a property, there's all sorts of structures that should sit behind that, most of which, in my experience, isn't in place. But if you're going to buy a joint asset together, there should be a methodology of dealing with not just the repairs and maintenance, but, as you say, the taxable side of things. And there's a lot of levels to this which haven't been thought through. And in fairness, do they need to be thought through when most people just go, "Oh, the accountant will deal with it"?
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. It's always been, in my mind, that there's been this Chinese wall between us and the accountants. Anyway, we turn up with our shoebox full of things. Make this work. Come back to me with a figure I need to pay to HMRC, and the stuff that happens in between is just jiggery and pokery, right?
Well, the underlying nature is compliance. Is I don't want to get into trouble, therefore I want you to sort out this issue. Now, I don't know whether I can double check. I've got a gut feeling of what that tax might be, but I've been in situations where accountants have done work for me and they've been absolutely shocked with what they've come back with. And they know your personal financial situation, and they say, you now owe all of this money to the revenue, and you go, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to take a payment plan on this one then. Is the revenue going to give you a payment plan? Are they going to make your life difficult? Are they going to add a load of extra fees? It's all incredibly stressful. And I think there's levels to this, which it revolves around a sense of ignorance, if I can use that word. I don't know the rules well enough, so I need to defer to somebody who does. A level of compliance. I don't want to get into trouble, therefore I'm just going to turn it over to somebody else and then do what they tell me to do. And the world has become incredibly complicated so that we can't actually figure out the rules on our own without spending many, many hours deep in books trying to figure it all out. And then they change the rules the following year, of course. So,
all right, Hamish and Silas both, actually, there's an expression that I've only just learned called digital exclusion. It basically means people who have been brought up, like you, like me, in a certain way of thinking, now are being forced down a route which is totally unfamiliar. There's going to be a lot of people out there that are hidebound, perhaps, or even just ignorant of what should or shouldn't be, or could or couldn't be. This digital exclusion is going to obviously appeal, or not apply, to a whole morass of landlords, particularly people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. This just appears to be a nightmare in the making. What say you, Hamish?
Well, what we're looking at, of course, is a demand for people who have experience to advise those of us who are perhaps caught up in this particular sort of trap. Now, as it sort of stands, we do find that there is a shortage of professionals throughout industry. It isn't just property. It is in the world of accountancy. We know full well that in the context of law, we're desperately short of well-qualified property lawyers. And what we're actually trying to do is put greater demands on a system that already has actually sort of burst out of its seams. So what we're doing all the time now is just adding layer upon layer upon layer. And this is what's happened to the conveyancing industry generally. Layer upon layer upon layer. You think about it. Solicitors are now needing to become qualified tax advisors without being tax advisors. They just get the certificate to suggest that they are in order to comply with regulations. It doesn't mean they know anything about the tax. It just means they've got a little bit of paper to suggest it. I would not rely on that bit of paper to cover me. I would actually want to go to an expert. So we're trying to pull on a limited number of experts. And what we have throughout the whole system, it doesn't matter if it's AI, it doesn't matter if it's digitization, we have a shortage of specialist managers of this this data in specific arenas. And I would suggest that we're going to find exactly the same thing with these properties. Those people who would like to be able to support landlords, but don't necessarily have the experience to be able to do it. There's an awful lot of training needs to go on that we haven't actually gone through. So it's another change, it's another regulation that will be coming through, and we don't know quite how it's going to hit us fully yet.
Well, can I just follow up on that, Hamish, because you made an excellent point. I was talking to somebody the other day who's a very old hand in the property world, and he made an excellent observation about the difference between black and white and the area of grey. And when we're younger, we tend to think in very black and white lines, or at least I certainly know that I did. And as you get older, you start to realise there's the 50 shades of grey, shall we say, in the middle, that is very much where most things tend to operate. And if you go to your normal accountant to get your tax advice, and then you go to an shall we say, HMRC tax specialist who has then set up his own tax consultancy, you're going to get wildly different answers from those two people. And both are operating within the law, shall we say, but the HMRC specialist knows the rules so well, he knows exactly how to play the game. So, for example, I'll give you a little tip that was given to me. One particular gentleman told me that if he wanted to settle a dispute with the HMRC, he would ring them at about 3:45 on a Friday afternoon and have the conversation, because he knew that person wanted to abandon the phone call and go home. So the chances of them settling were remarkably high. And I'm not saying it's about gaming the system, but it is about gaming the system. You know, I think there's an element of who have you got on your corner fighting for you that's going to help you work out the best deal for you and your family.
Well, here we are back again. No matter how much we feel we're digitized, it all comes back down to potential gamesmanship. Who knew? Thank you once again, Silas, for illuminating, at least putting some interesting oil on these partially troubled waters. And Hamish, thank you very much for your perspectives as well. To all of you watching, there's more to come on both this topic and many others. Please do stay tuned. Remember, tomorrow we've got Cladding Matters at 1 p.m, which should be quite an interesting bun fight. But until then, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars. Make sure you keep your accounts properly and stay hydrated. Bye-bye now.